want to just because there are so many mitzvahs and they all apply to us. So I want to just tie them up. Hopefully we'll get to Emor today, but there are a few more mitzvahs I want to go through here. Page 662. Page 662. And still in Parshas Kedoshim. So it says, "Chukosai tishmoru, keep my statutes. Behem techalos arbia kilayim. Don't crossbreed animals. Sod chalos izra kilayim. Don't crossbreed in your field. Ubeged kilayim shatnez lo yale alecha." And you're not allowed to wear shatnez, which is a forbidden mixture of wool and linen. Now, the halacha is that nowadays, well, I forgot to check out the agricultural one somebody asked yesterday, but the halacha is nowadays that you do not, if you buy a suit, your suits have to be checked for shatnez. Certain, in Israel, if you go, and I know some places in America, but in Israel, when you go in to buy a suit, so generally it has a hechsher on it. They actually have sewed into the suit that it's been already checked and supervised for shatnez. Some places in Chutz La'aretz you can find that also. Some places in Chutz La'aretz you find it also. Don't make a mistake when you see a hechsher on the suit of eating it. It means it's been checked for shatnez. If they're not checked, so it just statistically, suits that come from China often have they could be a wool suit, but often in the collar, they use it as a stiffener. They'll use linen in the collar, and then sometimes the buttons are sewed on, and sometimes they're wearing the sleeve. So there are shatnez labs all over the place where they test them for. To see they use some suits it's possible to take them out. Otherwise, it's a problem. What you see over here, though, is something remarkable. The Torah, if you look at this, watch this. In this pasuk, the Torah says you can't crossbreed animals. You can't mix in your field when you plant crops. You can't mix the seeds of the crops. Certain halachas about that, and you can't mix in your clothing. Now there are two other places in the Torah where it says you can't mix. Where else does it say you can't mix? You can't mix meat and milk, and you can't mix animals. Not only you can't crossbreed them, you're not allowed to pull a wagon with animals of different weight. You can't have a horse and an ox pulling an animal. Now what's remarkable is, think about a person in the course of the day. You wake up in the morning, and you put on your clothing, and there's already a reminder, don't mix. Then you go to breakfast, and there's a reminder, don't mix. Then you go out to your agriculture, and there's a reminder, don't mix. Then you go out to your livestock to plow in your field, don't mix. Then you go into your barn where they live, don't mix, you can't crossbreed them. That means everywhere a Jew looks, in his clothing, in his food, in his agriculture, and in his livestock, there's don't mix. And therefore we have a reminder that ultimately we don't mix with the other nations. Not physically, intermarriage, and not ideologically. That we have our own set of rules in life, we have our own approach to life, and we're not looking to take ideas from others. We have our Torah, and therefore the Torah, everywhere you look, the Torah, there's no coincidence that in every aspect of life, wherever you look, the Torah is telling you not to mix. The next one I want to do is there's another mitzvah that's very much that pertains to us is in Pasuk Chaf Gimel. Oh, by the way, animals that are crossbred, so that the offspring by definition are sterile. There are no mommy and daddy mules. There's a horse and a donkey produces a mule. A mule is sterile. And that's often when you go against the Torah that you see that there's no bracha. There's not going to be a bracha. There's no continuity in it. That's one of the ideas. Now, if you look at Pasuk Chav Gimel, it says V'chisivo el ha'aretz u'natatem kol eitz ma'achol. When you plant, it's on page 662, 5 lines to the bottom. When you plant trees, fruit-producing trees, v'araltem ha'orloso es pirios shalosh shanim yilcha abarelim lo ye'ochel. You're not allowed to eat the fruit for the first 3 years. The 4th year, the fruit has to be brought to Yerushalayim. Then in the 5th year, it's open season. And here again, the Torah is teaching you that there's an idea of self-control, which I've mentioned many times, that if there's one theme that runs through the Torah start to finish, it's the theme of self-control. You have to control what you eat, control what you look at, control your thoughts, control your selfishness, control your ego, control. It's all about self-control. When they talk about per se, he's got a controlling personality. Well, that could be very good if you control yourself. If we try to control others, right? If you're being controlled, that just means you're married, right? But if you're trying to control other people, so then that's the wrong use of control. But if you're a person who is controlling yourself, that's what the Torah is about. When it comes to the fruits, what do you want more than anything else? You planted a tree, I can't wait to get, 3 years. Hey, exercise some restraint. Page 662, exercise some restraint. And you see that this does apply to us today, even if you're not planting trees. Because if you want to eat lunch, what do you got to do? First thing is, you can't take bread, you got to wash. And you got to make a bracha. But before you make a bracha, you have to check if you have to go to the bathroom, you can't make a bracha. So first you have to go to the bathroom, then you have to come out and you have to make an asher yatzar. Right? And after the asher yatzar, then you got to wash. Then after you wash, then you got to get the bread. So before you can't just grab and eat. As a Jew, you can't. And even if it's not bread, you still got to make a bracha. And the part of baking a bracha, we think of brachas in terms of thanking Hashem for the food. It's true. That's for sure true. But part of the bracha is that it just forces us to use a little self-control. There's a little exercise restraint. I want to grab a hunk of salami out of the refrigerator. And before you do, check if you have to go to the bathroom. Somebody told me that the Cardinals have asked the Pope to bring some Romanian salamis from Chicago. I mentioned yesterday, the Pope is a White Sox fan. I don't know if last year his prayers didn't help them, and they're probably going to help this year either, because they need a miracle. So I told you I don't want them on my team. So there's an idea of self-control, and even when we eat, and then after you got to bench. Not only that, you got to think about the food that you eat, because now I'm going to be fleishik. People sometimes say, "Oh, I don't want to make myself fleishik." You ever hear people say that? A Jew will pass up a delicious meat lunch because sometimes in the next 6 hours he wants that much milk in his coffee. And I hear people say, "I don't want to become fleishik." Listen, it's not a conversion. You'll be okay. You'll come out of it. You'll come around, kid. Don't worry. You'll make it. And especially if you're of German descent, so it's only 3 hours. Do you know that they wait 3 hours? And in England, it's very, very common because a lot of the English immigrants came over from Germany. I have a lot of students in the other yeshiva from England. They're not from German descent, but they keep 3 hours. My daughter-in-law is actually one of my daughter-in-laws is from German descent, so she grew up with 3 hours. But when she married my son, he doesn't have the option to go her that direction. That she immediately took on. She would have been allowed to keep it. She's allowed to keep the 3 hours, but she decided to take 6 hours, take it on because of with children. So then the children are just going to be confused. If it's like the kid is with his mother and the mother says to him, Chaim, you can't have that chocolate bar, you're fleishik. He says, you want to see how fast I can become milkshakes? So the kids could get confused. And what do you call it? But the theme over here is the theme of self-control. Okay, now take a look at Pasuk Chavav. Lo sochlo al adam, don't eat. Literally, it means don't eat on the blood, which involves certain. The Rashi brings out that this involves quite a few mitzvahs, which have to do with the Sanhedrin. What do you call it? It has to do with korbanos. It has to do with certain things. But then it says lo senachashu velo seonenu, which he translates as do not indulge in sorcery and do not believe in lucky times. Lo seonenu means. Like what we would call, Friday the 13th, anything that is time-bound, anything is time-bound. Now, lo senachashu, I don't know, he translates lo senachashu as sorcery, but what lo senachashu means is what we would call signs of, it's a bad omen. It's a bad omen, like a black cat crossed your path. You might not, which is, by the way, if it is a panther, so that is a bad omen. If it's which is where I sense that some of if you look in the mirror and the mirror cracks, right? Well, you're having a bad day there. If don't walk under a ladder. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty logical. Be bad luck for you, and it'd be bad luck for the guy on the ladder if you kick into it and he falls. I imagine that's how it started. Somebody walked under a ladder, a pail of paint fell on his head and killed him, and the guy fell off the ladder and he got killed. I said it's bad luck to walk under a ladder. I'm assuming that's sort of thing, because when I see people on ladders, I don't walk under ladders. It has nothing to do with superstition. And when I see black cats, I head the other direction. Right? It doesn't. I told you the last time I was on a teal with Ohr Somayach, they took us on a hike in Ein Gedi. We're going back many years, guys. I don't do these things anymore. And I remember we started off walking on the path, and in Hebrew in English, there's a sign in English, beware of bobcats. And I remember looking at that sign and thinking, now what am I supposed to do with this information? Right? Why are you telling me this? If I see a bobcat, what am I supposed to do? Well, don't mess, bro. There's a sign. Why are you telling me this? Don't, maybe they're just giving you a warning. Get ready to say your final Kriya Shema before you die. I'm not sure why they're telling. So yes, that could be bad luck. So anything that has to do with superstition, bad luck, and a person takes action on it is a prohibition. So why is it prohibited? Why is it prohibited? Because you're taking your faith, you're removing your faith from God and putting your faith into nonsense. And so now, I'm not talking about when you're playing Monopoly, and you're talking to the dice type of thing, and you blow on the dice, because everybody knows that that's nonsense. But I'm not so sure. It could be that like, come on, people, come on. I know who you're talking to. Are you talking to the dice? And then you got bigger problems than superstition, But all these things, that superstition removes your faith in God, because we're supposed to believe that God's controlling the world, not because some sign, some omen, or something took place that sidetracks the faith for a Jewish person. The next one is extremely important, because this is something that is applies halacha l'maisa now. They all apply and they're all important, but this one is something that we're doing on a daily basis. Lo sakifu pe'as roshchem. Do not, how does he translate it? Round off the edge of your scalp. And what that means is that we're not allowed basically from this area around, cutting down over here, taking off the sides of the head. And that does not matter if it's with a razor or if it's with a shaver or a scissors, it doesn't matter. That's why we leave payas. The idea of payas, what they call payas, is not a Yiddish word. It's really from the word payah. Payah is the corner. Like we said, you have to leave a corner of your field. These are the payot of the rosh. This is the corners of the head on the side. And so the tradition among Hasidim and even among many Litvaks is in order to not take any chances, they actually leave the long payas. Sometimes they're curled, sometimes they look like slinkies. I had an uncle who was a Satmar Chassid, right? He had long curly payas, we used to call him Uncle Bing Bing, because he would come to, when I was a little kid, we'd take his payas and go bing, we called him Uncle, he was Uncle Bing Bing, hardcore Chassidish guy. He was also an undercover cop for the New York Police Department. He was a really interesting guy. So he was, what do you call it? He had the long payas. That's in order to commemorate and not take chances on cutting down. That's the first halach. The second one is, v'lo sashchi says paz zikonecha. You're not allowed to use a razor on your face. Now, these are two different halachas. One is not coming out. I forgot what this haircut. There's a haircut that you go all the way around and take everything down. You look like Scottie Pippen. He looks like he's wearing a yarmulke. Maybe what's it called? A fade or a bull? I don't know. What? A ball? Yeah, that sort of thing. Put a ball around it and then take it all down. That you can't do. If the face is not a question of here, you can't take it off completely. I think you have to leave at least 2 millimeters of hair over here. And there are guys who have the payas behind the ears, which, by the way, that started because of anti-Semitism, because people were hiding their payas. And nowadays, there's nothing to hide. If you have payas, you can wear them out. The face has to do with razor cut. You could use a shaver if a shaver is not a razor cut. Now, there are two different types of shavers, and sometimes you have to show your shaver to Rav Samet to show him. If it's a shaver that it's like it's got a head against the hair, and then it's just cutting the hair that goes through. That's generally okay, because all that is a fast scissors action. But if it's what they call a lift and cut, where it almost lifts the skin through the grill, and then the thing is, they even call it an electric razor. That could be problematic because it's like a razor on the face. The reason you can't use razors on the face are twofold. Number one, both of these things, the Seforno says that these type of haircuts and shaving with a razor, these were customs of fools, drunks, and priests. That's what the Seforno says. And we don't want to be fools, drunks, or priests, and therefore to not emulate these sort of foolish people or drunk people or priestly people, so then we don't do it, number one. Number two, you'll notice that it says velosashchis. Now the word losashchis, top line, he translated as do not round off, and the last word, do not destroy. That means if you shave with the scissors, you can't get as close. If you shave with a razor, you're scraping it clean. That's called total destroying. You're removing it totally. So there's a fascinating explanation. The Rabbeinu Bechaye says, he was a Talmud of the Ramban, one of the disciples of the Ramban. The Rabbeinu Bechaye says, there are 5 senses. A human being has 5 senses. They are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. Because the tongue is the most sensitive touching organ that we have. If you have if you're trying to find, I'll give you practical advice now, so you should pay me for this. If you ever have a roll of Scotch tape and you can't find where it starts, it's easier to find it with your tongue than with your finger. Trust me from experience. Right? With your finger, you can't slide over. The tongue is much more sensitive. On the tip of the tongue, the sensors on the tip of the tongue actually magnify whatever the tongue touches. That's why when you have a cavity and you ever have a cavity, you got to go to the dentist. And you touch it with your tongue, it feels like you got a crater in there, right? And in fact, it's not all that big, but the tongue magnifies it. So all 5 senses, Rabbeinu Bechaye says, are right in this area over here, including the hearing, right over here. The 5 points on the face that we're not allowed to run a razor over, we're not sure exactly where those points are. They're basically 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We don't know exactly where they are, therefore we don't use a razor on our face at all. Rabbeinu Bechaye says symbolically, the Torah is telling you that these 5 points corresponding to the 5 senses in this region, a Jew's job in life is not lahashchis. We're not to destroy the senses. That's not our job. We're not ascetics who destroy our senses. We live with our senses and we use our senses. We just have to channel them properly. The idea of total removal of our senses, of any sort of pleasure and enjoyment, that's a Christian idea. That's not a Jewish idea. The Jewish idea is to use it. We have to use it. Listen, guys, if you're going to eat cholent, you need your senses, right? If you're going to eat meat on Yontif, you need your senses. If you're going to get married, you need your senses. There's nothing wrong with using them. You got to use properly. Not the ideal of complete removal and destruction. That's what the Torah says. That's not Jewish. Okay. One other point is the page Chaf Ches, the next one. Let me ask you a question. How could you do one act and transgress 6 million prohibitions with one act? Lashon Hara. Yeah, you theoretically can speak Lashon Hara on 6 million, on an entire community. Not bad. Hey, good. Lashon Hara. That works. How about a physical act? What do you say?
Oh, I was going to ask if it's, the idea of like one sin leading to another.
One sin leading to another is a chain, but it'd be pretty hard to get up to 6 million. So look at the next pasuk. There's a good one. It's a good brain teaser. It says, V'seret lanefesh lositu b'v'sarchem. You are not allowed to cut yourselves in mourning over a deceased person. There was a tradition. People in a state of mourning, they would cut themselves I actually remember when Ayatollah Khomeini, he should rest in pieces. When Ayatollah Khomeini, Olav Hashnabel, when he died, so the Iranians, I remember seeing in I think it was Newsweek magazine, they had a picture of the Iranians at his funeral. I mean, his funeral was a travesty. They had about 1 million frantic fundamentalist Iranians out there at his funeral, and they actually had to put his body in a helicopter because the crowd was in a frenzy, and so they flew over the crowd. There were 8 guys in the helicopter with the body. They flew over the crowd because they would never get it to the grave site past the crowd, so they flew over to the grave site, and then by the time they got the body out of the helicopter, the crowd somehow noticed what was going on. Now they got 1 million Iranians are running at you, so the 8 guys took his body and they just ran to the grave, and at a few meters before the grave they dropped it, and then this is their grand leader, and then eventually they just kind of shoveled it in and went plop. They got in the helicopter and amscrayed. That was what happened. Now I saw a picture they had in the picture of these Iranian women. They're wearing the full dress, and they're cutting them, so they got blood running down their foreheads and on the sides. They're cutting themselves in mourning. The Torah says so. One way that you could do it. Now the Mishnah says if you make 1 cut over a dead person, so then it's 1 prohibition. If you make this cut and dedicate it to 5 people, the Mishnah says you transgress 5 prohibitions. So I heard Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, he said, and if you make this cut, you make 1 cut and dedicate it to the 6 million who died in the Holocaust, you've transgressed 6 million prohibitions. Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? Because a Jew, like everything else, a Jew is told that death is no different than any other area of life, and self-control has to be exercised. That means a person, a Torah Jew mourns the way the Torah says to mourn. And you notice that the Torah says it's 7 days of mourning, then 30 days, then a year, and that's it. And the 7 days always represents a unit of completion. When you get married, it's 7 days of rejoicing. Yontif is 7 days. 7 days of Sukkot, 7 days of Pesach, if you're from Chutz La'aretz, so you got an extra day. 7 days of mourning. That's a unit. 7 is the unit. That's what the Torah says to do, and the Torah says how to mourn. Like everything else in life, the Torah says how a Jew mourns. This is beyond. That means a person is going beyond what the Torah says. The Torah says we expect this, not more than this, not more, and therefore you don't cut. Then it says, where is it? Viksoves kakalo sitnu b'chamanei Hashem. Now this refers to a tattoo. It has to be very, very clear that if a person has a tattoo, there is no halachic obligation to remove it. There's no halachic obligation. The prohibition is to get tattooed. There's no halachic obligation to remove it once a person has to do it. And you should know that what a person does when they were younger, it's not your fault. You didn't know. And then you have it. I heard once about a guy who was a Baal Tshuva, so he went to the mikveh, and he had a tattoo. And so the people at the mikveh started giving him a hard time, and he was embarrassed. And then this old guy comes over to him, real old guy comes over, he says, look, he rolls up his sleeve, and he's got a number from the Holocaust. He says, I got a tattoo also, let's go in together. Right? And they took him into the mikveh. Nothing you can do about it. You don't have there are people who use some sort of, what's it called, to remove it, to try to remove it, whether you use lasers or whatever it is. Okay, you could if you want to, but there's no obligation to do so. There have been, one question was asked, there was a woman in the Holocaust who had a tattoo on her body that they tattooed on her. She's a prostitute for Hitler's armies. A Jewish woman and that was tattooed on her. And then she and her husband went to a posek to ask if she's, if she, wasn't particularly heartwarming. And he said to the contrary. You should wear it as a badge of pride that after all that you've been through, you're still willing to devote yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I would say the same thing for somebody who's got a tattoo. You have a tattoo, you should wear it as a badge of pride. In spite of that, look what you've done with your life, and you've changed, and whatever. If you would have known, you wouldn't have done it. Now you know, and you're not going to do it again. And it's a badge of pride, and the person should not be embarrassed about it at all. Okay. The one more point in Kedoshim, then we're going to go on to my favorite Parsha. I shouldn't say favorite parsha, but it does talk about honoring kohanim. Oh boy, you ain't heard nothing yet. You know, they don't just. I'm just telling you now. When we get to Parsha Emor, you have to exercise restraint not to throw money at me by the time I finish with you. One more point towards the end of the Parsha on 664. The 664 it says like this: Moznei tzedek. Scales of righteousness, avnei tzedek, stones, the stones that go into the scale. Have you guys ever seen these actual, they used to have scales once upon a time, weight, the scales like that. Now everything's electronic. Ephas tzedek, vehin tzedek yeh lachem. These are various measuring, where in an open air market where you're selling produce, you have to have them. Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzeisi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. So the Torah says you're not allowed to not only cheat people in weights and measures, you're not even allowed to own a measure that is off weight. I mean, if you own a stone, like the old days, if you ever get into an open air market, I don't know if you see it nowadays. I remember seeing them, they still had them. The actual weight itself, if it says 1 kilo on it and it doesn't weigh a kilo, it weighs more than a kilo, and either way it can be used for cheating, you're not even allowed to own, I get to you 1 second, yes. You're not even allowed to own the stone. You have to get rid of it, number one. Number two, it's considered a very severe prohibition, because if you're cheating people in weights and measures, so then you may be cheating hundreds of people for small amounts because it makes a profit for you. And at the end of the day, you have no way of doing tshuva because you don't know everybody who you've cheated. So if you ever go to Machane Yehuda, the open air vegetable bar here, some of these guys are not necessarily Shomer Shabbos, but they're traditional Jews. They always will give you more on the scale. They'll hit that scale will be 5 grams more than when you buy, because this is a very severe prohibition. One of the things, I'll get to once I guess, one of the things over here they have to be careful of, because it's so easy to cheat people in this area, so easy to cheat people, and you can't do tshuva. What does it take? If you're a couple of grams off, so then over with the amount of quantity, so you're going to make some money. My mother told me when I was a little kid, I still remember the guy, Vic. Vic was the vegetable guy. Vic was a Greek guy, and he was a vegetable guy, and he used to deliver the fruits and vegetables to our house. I still remember because he come in and he was smoking a cigarette. I still remember the smell. He smelled like cigarette and vegetables. And I was a little kid at the time. It's a good smell. And so Vic would come into the house, and my mother would give him an order. He'd go out to his car, and he'd bring it in. So one time my mother sensed that she's not getting quite as much as she. So one time she waited in the house, and it didn't weigh what it was supposed to weigh. So one time she followed him out to his truck, and she watched him as he put the bananas on. He put it with his hand on the scale, and then he weighed the apples with his hand on, pushing down with his hand on the scales. My mother said, "Vic, take your hand off." He says, "This is the way I weigh it," right? So the end was that he died, and they didn't have an address for him. What do you call it? He owed, they had on the bill, they owed him $57. So my parents figured it evened out in the end. Whatever he was cheating them all along. But at the end of the day, you could be cheating a lot of people. And I want to tell you two interesting halachic questions that came up. One of them was this couple that came to Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein. They were distributors. I think I mentioned to this once. They were the middlemen. So that, in every of these little stores and shops that you have, so they get, milk and cheese and all these little containers of what's called lebanon, yogurts and that sort of thing. And they were the middleman. And they were distributing it for quite a few years. They were distributing it. They would get it from the main company, from Tenuva. And then they bring in like a bag with 500 rolls or 350 yogurts and that sort of thing, and give it to the shops. And what they realize is that they could scoop a couple off the top. So they take out 2 yogurts or 3 rolls or whatever it is. The guy in the shop's not counting, and that way they can make some extra bucks. And after about 20 years of doing this, they decided to become Balei Tshuvas. So they came to Rabbi Zilberstein and said, "We've been stealing for the last 20 years, and we want to know what the halacha is. What do we have to do?" So he said, "How much do you estimate that you've made over the years?" They said, "About $150,000. They said, "Well, the halacha is if you've stolen, you got to return it." So they said to him, "We thought you might say that, and we made up our minds before we even came to ask you the question that if you do say that, we will sell our home and rent an apartment and use the money to pay back our debts." So Zilberstein stood up stood up, Rabbi Yashiv's son-in-law, and he said, people like you prevent terrible decrees from coming to the Jewish people. Person who does tshuva for stealing, or does tshuva, you are protecting the Jewish people from harsh decrees. That's real tshuva. You stole, you got to pay it back. Number one, my wife is still worried, I think, about a ball she once shoplifted, a little ball when she was about 7 years old. She's nervous. So that was the first. The second story was a guy who took his little kids on a hike up north during his vacation in the heat of summer. And they went up north and they spent the whole day, and then they had to get on a bus and go back to Yerushalayim. So they get on the bus, and the bus is packed with people. Now they're standing, and I got to stand for 2.5 hours to Yerushalayim. So at a certain point, after a few minutes, he takes out his cell phone and he says real loud, yeah, well, the doctor said 2 of them have Mexican flu for sure, and 2 might have Mexican flu. And the bus stopped about 10 minutes later. One of the stops, half the bus cleared off. And now they had place to sit, to lie down, and they made it to Yerushalayim. When he got to Yerushalayim, he came to a Rav, and he said, I have pangs of conscience. I think I may have created what's called Genevas Das. I may have perpetuated a deception. And he told the Rav what he said, you didn't perpetuate a deception. That's out and out stealing. Because you forced those people off the bus. Each one of those people had to buy another ticket to get on another bus. You owe every single one of those people reimbursement for the ticket. Now you can never find them. You've stolen from the community. And the halacha says if you've done something like that, the only thing you could do for tshuva is to then do something for the community. Build a shul, build a school, build a bus, build something for the community. But at the end of the day, you don't know that all those people are going to benefit from it. And that's why, and you can't do tshuva. That's why a person has to know when it comes to stealing that it's a very, very difficult thing to do tshuva for. Yeah, yes, what were you going to ask?
So you mentioned something about the scale. A Jew is not allowed to own false
Weights.
false scale. And I just wanted to ask if you own a scale that is adjustable.
That's not a problem.
Is that okay?
Most scales are adjustable. Especially nowadays, I don't know how it would apply to electronic scales because if it breaks, you get it fixed. In those days, the stone would wear down, and then you're weighing a kilo, and it's less than a kilo, so you're making money off the customer, and it's a big temptation. Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
Let's say, it's prohibition to have a scale that's off measurement, but let's say the measurement is cheating you out of money, so you're the one taking a loss, but you're fine with that.
If you want to take, the question is, what about if you're going to take, I don't know about the stones, the halacha says if it's off, because even if the stone is off against you, you can figure out how to use it if you go buy something using that stone, so then it's going to work against the other guy. So the halacha says you can't own it. You can't own a stone if it's off measure. Okay? But there's a very severe halacha. Okay, let's go on to Parsha Zemor. By the way, just if anybody is interested in going to my website, dovidbkaplan.com, and there are various things for sale, how to help your son learn Gemara, how to run a Shabbos table, how to find a shidduch, how to check out a shidduch questionnaire, and you can visit at the site. No, I'm talking to you. You can visit at the site. I'm talking to the camera, not you guys. You can visit at dovidbkaplan.com and spend money. Now, speaking of spending money on kohanim, take a look at Parsha Zemor. Vayomer, what a coincidence. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Emor el kohanim b'nei Aaron, page 672. Speak to the kohanim, the sons of Aaron, ve'amarta aleim, and you shall say to them, lenefesh lo yitama be'amav. He may not come into become tameh to a dead body. Now, the first thing you notice over here is that there seems to be repetition in the pasuk. It says, Emor el kohanim, ve'amarta aleim. Say to the kohanim, and you shall say to them. Emor el kohanim b'nei Aaron, say to them, ve'amarta aleim, and say to them, l'nefesh leitamav. That's strange. Why does it say Emor ve'amarta? Why is there a double terminology? Why does the Torah seem to repeat? So take a look at the first Rashi. Emor el kohanim, says Rashi, right column, top line, Emor ve'amarta, say and you shall say, lehazir gedolim al haktanim. The Torah is urging the adult kohanim to supervise the minor kohanim. That means that the prohibition of coming into contact with a dead body with all the various halachas, which means physical contact, he can't be under the same roof as a dead body, he can't be within 4 amos of the dead body, all of the halachas that apply to an adult kohen, they apply to a minor kohen as well. Now, the obvious question is what, gentlemen? Children don't have mitzvahs. If that's true, then why is there a warning here? Children do have a mitzvahs. Parents have to stop children from doing averas.
Is it for the heshbon of the father?
But if that's true, why doesn't the Torah warn when it comes to eating pork? Why does the Torah come to it? It should say, don't eat pork and make sure your kids don't eat pork. Don't eat, what do you call it? And don't break Shabbos, don't let your kids break Shabbos. Why is specifically over here by the kohanim coming into contact with a dead body? Which only applies to about, how many of you are kohanim? Yeah, it's lonely at the top, huh? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what percentage? It's somewhere about 5% of the population are kohanim. About 5% of the population. So here the Torah is saying, yeah, the kohanim have to supervise. What about everybody else? What about pork? What about Shabbos? What about Yoneh? What about all the other averas in the Torah? Idol worship. Make sure your kids don't worship idols. I mean, why did the Torah say over here, specifically over here, that the kohanim have to supervise their children? So, yeah, what do you say, Yavi?
I thought maybe it had to do with the fact that like the children will become tameh if they go near a dead body. Like even though they don't have mitzvahs, they'll still become tameh.
They'll become tameh. So what? It's a lot worse to eat pork than to become tameh. It's certainly worse to worship idols and break Shabbos than to become tameh. Becoming tameh is a byproduct. The prohibition is not to become tameh. People ask, once a kohen is tameh, why can't you continue becoming tameh? You're once you're tameh, all tameh. The answer is that tameh is only the result. Tameh is only the result. But it would be the equivalent of saying, well, once I've eaten pork, I've become porculated, so I can continue eating pork. No, you can't. Once you eat, every time you take a bite of pork is another prohibition. Coming into contact with the dead body is a prohibition. What's the result? The result becomes tameh. But okay, so once tameh, always tameh. But there's still each time there's still another prohibition of coming into contact with a dead body. In other words, even if he didn't become tameh, he'd still be prohibited to come in contact with a dead body. So the commentaries say there's something distinctly different about this than other prohibitions. When it comes to pork, my son, the Kohen, my sons are Kohanim, by the way. My son, the Kohanim, they are, and my daughters are also Kohanim. But that's insignificant because they're married to. None of my son-in-laws are Kohanim, right? None of my son, who is a Kohen, is married to a girl whose father's a Levi. Now, what greater joy in life is there than having your father-in-law wash your hands? How's that? My father-in-law was actually a Kohen. My wife's a Bas Kohen. But have a Levi, hey, Pops, you want to get over here and do your thing? and have them wash your hands. What could be better? What greater joy than that? So, hey, you want to hurry it up? I got to do it. So, hey, listen, fringe benefits. But the answer is that a Kohen, in other area, he's Jewish. They play with other Jewish kids. All Jewish kids don't eat pork. All Jewish kids don't wear shatnez. There's not going to be a slip-up over there. Everybody's supervising their kids at that level. But what about the Kohen who's playing with his kids and they decide to play hide and seek in a cemetery? And now for the Yisrael, there's no problem. The Yisrael could go into the cemetery, or the Yisrael could play with rodents, or whatever it is. The Kohen's son is with an environment that is different than what some of his laws are different than the Yisrael kid. So the Kohen's parents, they have to be vigilant to make sure that their kids are not going to be involved in that. Because this is something the kids will be drawn after other kids. The extension of this is that we as Jews have to be careful to supervise our kids when you're living in an environment either with non-Jews or with or unfortunately with Jews who are not yet Shabbos, who are not yet from. So you got to watch your kids that they're not being affected by other kids. When my kids would go on, in America, when kids would go away for Lag Bomer, here Lag Bomer is coming up. Where did day schools and yeshivas go Lag Bomer? We either went to a park and played baseball, or we went to a baseball game, or we went to an amusement park. In Israel, where do they go? Graves. Right. In Israel, you either go to Tzfas and you go to the old cemetery in Tzfas, or you go to Ma'aras HaMachpelah, or you go to Kever Rachel. In Israel, it's graves. I once heard about this family was in Israel for the summer on a tour, and first they went to the Rambam's Kever, and then they went to Rabbi Akiva, the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, Kever Rachel, and finally, towards in the middle of the trip, the 7-year-old girl says to her mom, "Hey, mommy, isn't anybody in this country alive?" That's what you do. You go to great Kivrei Tzadikim. In America, you go to amusement park. So when my kids would go away on Lag Bomer, I had to call the school to tell them, listen, you're going up to Ma'aras HaMachpelah, my kid can't go in, he's a Kohen. You're going up to Tzfas, be careful, there's a cemetery, my kid can't go in, he's a Kohen. And sometimes there were other kohanim in the class. One of my kids was the only Kohen. And I don't want to go to Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Could somebody wait outside for him in Hebron when everybody goes in, so he's not waiting alone by the kid? So that's security supervision. But from a halachic point of view, the parents have to be vigilant over here. It extends beyond halacha, gentlemen. Well, I'll get to you one second, Biddy. When you have children, you have to supervise who your kids are associating with. And the rule as parents, our rule, and the rule should be for parents, that anyone is allowed into our house. Any kids are allowed to play with my kids in my house when we were raising them. But when it came to my kids, I only let them go into a house where I know what's going on in that house. And if they have technology or they have behaviors or have a situation which I feel is unhealthy for my kids, then my kids are not allowed to go into that house. And you have a responsibility as a parent to supervise your children. And we spoke about this yesterday, about what you bring into your house and where your kids go. Biddy, what are we going to ask?
Out of curiosity, are all kohanim nowadays tamei anyway, or like?
Yes, all kohanim are considered. The question is if all kohanim are considered tamei nowadays, and the answer is yes. Everybody's got a cheskas tuma. We have all, first of all, just being born in a hospital. And born in a hospital, and they're dead bodies in the hospital, so chances are that the kohen became tamei. We have a cheskas tuma nowadays. We are considered tamei. I know that they do have these births, like at-home births. Kids, don't try this at home. They have at-home births, and I think they have like underwater births, which I never understood. Like, what you want the kid to become a scuba diver? Don't. When it comes to these things, let's not be creative and original. Let's just go to the hospital where there are doctors. I keep hearing. I just heard recently about somebody who gave birth in the cab. You give birth in a cab? By the way, if you give birth on a bus, on a plane, if a woman gives birth on a plane, the kid flies for the rest of his life free. Don't. Hey, really? Hey, that's a bargain. Or I think on a bus also, you ride the bus company for free. We don't do that. My mother once helped give birth to a lady on a bus also. They went on a teal here in Israel. The lady was 9 months pregnant, and they're climbing cliffs, and they're, which is also the other thing you do. Either go to graves or cliffs. That's what you do when you went over for in Israel. We have a cheskas tuma, but that goes to Avi's question. We are considered tamei, but we're still not allowed to come into contact with a dead body because it's the contact, that's the byproduct. It's the contact that's prohibited. And so ER tamei, we're considered tamei, but we're not allowed to come into contact with a dead body. That's one of the reasons. What's that?
Is it for a chinuch, or what's?
No, it's for prohibition. There's the actual los haseh of don't come into contact with a dead body. And each time you do, it's like you took a bite of pork. Okay. That's the basic idea here. Okay, so we'll continue with that more tomorrow because I'm going to give you there's a whole world of kohanim that anybody who's not a kohen, which is basically all of you, there is. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying. But there's there's a whole world of kohanim. For instance, hospitals, flying, travel, all sorts of things that kohanim have to be aware of that a lot of people who are not kohanim do not know, and it's really a very fascinating thing. And by the way, the Kohen Gadol, the halacha is that when he becomes a Kohen Gadol, one of the things is he's supposed to be wealthy. And the halacha is that when somebody was appointing a Kohen Gadol, if he was not wealthy, the other kohanim had to make him wealthy. They had to give him money. So I have sent in my application to be Kohen Gadol. It's in the middle of being processed. The chances are not great, but there's always hope.
Why was it important for him to be wealthy?
Because when you're wealthy, A, you don't need other people. B, you carry more influence when you're wealthy. They reported that Warren Buffett is retiring. They did not report that when I retire, they will not be reporting it. Warren Buffett, when wealthy people listen to wealthy, do you know that the Musar Sefer says, I think the Mitzvos, the Orchos Tzadikim or the Mitzvos, one of the Musar Sorim says, if you're a member of a Jewish community and you have a great idea for the community, but you're just, an average person, tell over your idea to either a Torah scholar or a wealthy man to allow him to report it, to suggest it. Because people will listen to him. I've been in cabs in Israel. Almost every cab driver knows how to fix the economy of the country, right? Yet, if Warren Buffett would come to Israel and suggest how to fix up the economy, people might pay attention a little more carefully. All right, see you tomorrow, boys.